Okay, good morning, everyone. We are on Mem Daled. Zok the Gemara, Mikol Makom Kashya. So we're dealing with Rava, and Rava said that an ox. The pictures I didn't realize when I bought the picture book, which is excellent, but the pictures in the article are also very, very good. So Rava says that an ox that you shecht by starting whatever you want to call it, the pharynx. How does he refer to it over here? He refers to it as the court of the esophagus. Sounds very fancy. But the pharynx, the top of the esophagus, he says that we're going to paskin like Rav and Shmuel. And if you start cutting it, you start the shchita in the pharynx and you go into the esophagus. Again, this would be the bottom of the animal. So the pharynx into the esophagus, the top of the esophagus down. You go on an angle, so it's going to be a problem. Now, we pointed out that that was a weird opinion of Rava, because you're basically taking the chumras of both. Because at the end of the day, you're taking the chumrah of Rav, and you're taking the chumrah of Shmuel. How are you taking the chumrah of Rav and the chumrah of Shmuel? Well, what did we say that Rav says? Rav says that if you do the shchita in that makom, it's okay. The problem is that he also holds that what? He holds that the small puncture in that area is going to be a problem, because by definition, the way that we seem to be understanding is that the two are connected. So since a shchita in the pharynx in the top of the esophagus is going to be okay, so by definition a small puncture in that area is going to be a problem. And Shmuel says that a small puncture in that area will not be a problem because shchita in that area is not okay. So what happens over here? You're taking the chumras of both. How are you taking the chumras of both? Because what are you doing? You're starting at the top and you're going to the bottom. This is important for the whole day. When you do shchita, you make a cut. You make a sever, you make obviously bigger than a little tear. But that's okay as long as it's in the process of shchita. But if you cut from the top of the esophagus and that's not the makom shchita, then at the moment that you cut it not in the makom shchita, you make it into a treifa. When you cut the trachea or the esophagus in a regular shchita, of course you're making it into a treifa, but you're not making it into a treifa because it's in the act of the shchita. But over here, the whole point is that you're doing it at the point of the top of the esophagus, which according to Rav is fine. Because even though it's a small hole, it's at the makom shchita. So according to Rav, it would be fine. According to Shmuel, it would be a problem. But according to Shmuel, what are you not doing here? According to Shmuel, you're only making a small puncture, and according to him, it's only pasul, it's only a treifa when you make a big puncture in rov. That's where we're talking about you taking the chumras of both, because according to Rav, it's a problem with even a small puncture, but that's not a problem there because that's a makom shchita. According to Shmuel, it's a problem in that place because it's not the makom shchita, but it's only a problem with the rov, which you're not doing here. If you're doing the rov, then you just say according to Shmuel, it's a problem. That's the whole problem here, that Rava is paskening like neither. He's taking the chumras of both. He's saying on one hand, you're ruining it because it's not the makom shchita, like Shmuel. And the same program, we're paskening like Rav, who says that what? Who says it's a problem because you're making a little cut as opposed to a rov of a cut. That's important. So mikol makom kashya. So how can Rava go ahead and forbid an ox in this case? When you go ahead and you're taking the chumras of both, Amar Rav Tava. So Rav Tava says, Kula karav avda. No, Rava went like Rav, and you actually have an understanding of Rav that's wrong. You understood Rav as saying that a little hole is a problem because that's a good makom shchita. Say, no, you have it wrong. His brother was Yehuda. He says, don't listen to Yehuda the way that he explained Rav, because Rav actually holds something else. There's a limit of where the shchita can take place in the esophagus. Again, we thought that Rav said that you can do the shchita everywhere. Again, the esophagus, as we're going to see, and you see there's a beautiful picture there if you flip a few pages. The next page on 4482, there's a picture. You go from the stomach, the esophagus and the trachea go up all the way to the throat. It seems like the trachea stops, right? It stops like in the ribs before it stops like in the middle of the ribs over there. But the esophagus goes all the way from the, as we'll see, the lower jaw, all the way to the stomach. So what are we talking about over here? So we're talking about the top part, closest to the back of the tongue, closest to the neck. We're going to talk about the bottom part as well. So it says the Gemara, what did Rav really hold? Rav says, Miklal de turbot haveshet lav makom shchita here. No, Rav set a limit. Rav says that Chazal set a limit, and he implies that what? This implies by saying that Chazal set a limit, they set a limit on the top. Rav doesn't hold like you thought, that you can shaft all the way to the back of the tongue. You can shaft all the way up the esophagus, even to the pharynx. Rav actually holds you can't shecht at that area. V'ka'amar b'mashehu. And nevertheless, he said that a slightest puncture is going to be a problem. We thought the fact that the slightest puncture is going to be a problem at the top of the esophagus, the pharynx, is dafka because Rav holds that that's the makom shchita. If that's the makom shchita, that's why a little thing is going to be a problem. Shmuel says it's not the makom shchita. You're going to have a much bigger hole in order to make it a problem. But now we're saying that the two things are not dependent on each other. We're saying that Rav holds, first of all, that a small incision in the top of the esophagus is a problem, and yet that's not the makom shchita. So now everything is according to Rav. Because when you start at the top of the esophagus and you cut into the esophagus, when you go from the pharynx into the esophagus, the initial cut, which is not at the makom shchita, is a small hole. It's a problem according to Rav. Then when you continue on to the esophagus, you already made it into a treifa, and it's not going to be kosher. And that's how Rav holds. Rav is actually holding like Rav. In this case, Shmuel would say, no problem. Because he says, yes, I agree that the top of the esophagus is not the makom shchita, but I hold that a small puncture will not ruin it. You need to have a big puncture. And since you're starting with only a small puncture and then you're getting to the esophagus, what you did in the beginning in the lav makom shchita was not an issue. When you then cut the esophagus, you're shalom al Yisrael. Says the Gemara, so Rava was paskening like Rav. Now that Rava paskening like Rav, it's not a problem. So now the Gemara is going to go, lamala ad kama. So if we're talking about the fact that both Rav and Shmuel at this point hold that the pharynx, i.e. the top of the esophagus, the core of the esophagus is not a good area, that means it's not a makom shchita, you could actually ruin it, says the Gemara, you can ruin it at a makom shchita as well, but the fact is that it's not a makom shchita, so where is that? What is the upper limit? That means where does the esophagus end? We're going to see the bottom limit would be where the esophagus ends and where the stomach starts, because the esophagus runs right into the stomach, as you see in that picture. But now the question is, where does the esophagus end going the other way? When you have to stretch the esophagus, so how high up does it go? It doesn't go all the way to the tongue, or maybe it does. How high up does it go?
If you check the trachea first, the trachea tank goes so far down.
The trachea you're shuttling before the esophagus.
Yeah,
but again, if you look at the picture,
rip it open.
No, but if you look at the
cut it at the bottom of the esophagus afterwards.
No, but if you look at the picture, we're saying how high up are you allowed to cut the esophagus? High up, I mean towards the head of the.
Right, but the bottom part though, you can't cut the trachea at that part. You have to cut the trachea near the top.
Maybe yes, maybe not. Or maybe you get around it, or maybe you cut on an angle.
You have to do a dissection.
Or maybe you cut on an angle this way. No, you could cut up this way on an angle. And we didn't speak about exactly where the trachea. You're talking about. We're going to see, doctor, in 1 second that you could actually cut the esophagus all the way to the stomach.
Right.
Well, first of all, it's being blocked by the ribs and it's being blocked by the trachea. But if you go like this, you cut the trachea and then you sort of go in.
You have to go through the trachea to get to the esophagus.
It's blocking it. The trachea is lower.
That's why the shaila is where you started, because you have to go one.
Seemingly you'd have to go one and then the other. Again,
simultaneously.
Well, again, if you know what you're
So that's what I'm saying.
if you know what you're doing, though, you could probably get to the. I'm sure that you could get to the esophagus somehow without cutting the trachea. You just would have to go like in right.
The puncture.
Yeah, that's what we were saying. You'd have to go in between, which would be puzzle.
Right.
But I'm sure, but there might be a way to get to it without. So it says lamala ad kama. How high up does the esophagus go? Amar of Nachman ad kedei tfisas yad. Until it tfisas yad. What does that mean? Until a few etzbos, 3 or 4 finger breaths from the top. A few etzbos. How much you can grab. That means a hand grab, a hand grasp from the top. This much. It would be like a tefach from the top. Again, we're looking, you have the picture there, right? Yeah. So we're looking from the top by where it starts, at the back of the throat. So you couldn't shech that top part. You'd have to shech 4 finger breaths down from where the top of the esophagus is. Says the Gemara, lemat kama. How far down does it go? Rav Nachman Amar Rabba, maravu ad kadesha yasir. And then in terms of being able to shecht until when, so you'd be able to shecht all the way from 4 hand breaths down, like a tefach, all the way, that whole red thing, all the way till you hit the kares, the pouch, until you hit the stomach, because as we know, that's where what? That's where the lining becomes hairy. The pouch has like these little thing called papillae, which papillae. Papillae, P-A-P-I-L-L-A-E.
Pronounce it
in plural.
You went to dental school. I didn't go to school. So.
Alumni, right?
Which are scraped off with a knife. So we know that that's inside of what we would call the stomach. So as soon as, so basically what it's telling you is that you could shecht all the way to that point where the esophagus hits the, as he's calling the pouch, where the esophagus hits the stomach.
Alumni is Latin and papilla, I think, is Greek. Because A-E versus I at the end.
I don't want to show off all my, Aini. Aini, is this so? There's only a problem. Problem is, tevach beveshet samach l'kari zeu karis hapnimi. The problem is it sounds like Rav held that the last tefach near the pouch, that means the last tefach of the esophagus. You just said that you can shecht all the way to where the esophagus hits the stomach, which is where the hairy-like molecules, or whatever you want to call them, are. But now it seems to be saying that the, now it seems to particles. Now it seems to be saying that what? That it's not where it hits, but even a tefach of the esophagus itself is considered to be part of the stomach. Tefach beveshet samuch lekari zeu kari zapnimi. The tefach closest to the stomach is actually considered to be a part of the stomach, and clearly you couldn't shech there. Amai, so why does he say that you could do the shechita all the way to the point where it hits the stomach? Ki kashachid bekaris kashachid. If you do it at the last tefach, right before the stomach, again, all the way right before that green arrow is, you're going to be shechting where? You're going to be shechting the stomach, quote unquote, halachically. No, read it wrong. Tefach bekare samach leveshet zeu kar zapinimi. It doesn't mean that the last tefach of the esophagus is considered like the stomach. The last tefach of the stomach is considered like the stomach and not like the esophagus. That's what it means. Iba you say, or you could say no. Really, the last tefach of the esophagus is considered to be like the stomach. So how can you shech there? Kikamara betorah demasir tvei. Well, it depends what type of animal you're talking about. By an ox, so it becomes hairy a little bit further up, closer, even outside of the stomach. The last tefach of the esophagus coming from the throat, that's going to be a little bit hairy. That you can't shecht. But again, it comes out fascinating. In a regular animal, if you go ahead and you shecht all the way to that point, right by the stomach, it's actually going to work. Shalom Aleichem. Mendel, nice to have you. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Shmuel. You have a good picture there? Rav Nachman says in the name of Shmuel, Turbat haveshet shenital kulo milachi kasher. Okay, so now we know that you could theoretically shecht the esophagus all the way up to the stomach, or at least very close to the stomach, which again comes out very, very interesting. Says the Gemara, Amar Nachman Amar Shmuel, Turbat haveshet shenital kulo milachi kasher. That if you look at the next picture over there, so you have the lower jaw, you have the veshet and the kana, which are connected to the lower jaw. So now the question becomes, what happens if the esophagus, we're not talking about the trachea here, but what happens if the esophagus / trachea becomes dislodged, becomes detached from the lower jaw? So it says with Nachman Amar Shmuel, it's still going to be kosher. That if the esophagus and the trachea become, or we're talking about the esophagus here, becomes dislodged, now we're going to see that the lechi tachton, the lower jaw, is made up of bone and made up of flesh. So this seems to be implying that the thing is being totally detached of the flesh and the jawbone, and therefore lamaisa it's considered to be a treifa. It's going to be a psul, as we'll see. It's either going to be when you shecht, it's going to be ikr because you're shechting uprooted simanim, or by definition, when the simanim are uprooted, they become a treifa. Utvitana tuna, we have a mishnah that in fact supports this. Nita lechia tachton kasher. If the lower jaw was removed, the animal is permitted. Now it's important to note that the two words, even though they're saying the same thing, we're going to see that they're saying actually different things. Because one of them is saying that the esophagus became detached from the jaw. That sounds like the esophagus is literally detached from the jaw. The other part is saying that the jaw was removed. And as we'll see in a second, the jaw could be removed, most of the jaw can be removed, and some of it might remain. So the esophagus might still be attached to the part that remains. At this point, the Gemara is assuming it's the same thing. That removing the jaw, or the esophagus becoming detached from the jaw, would be the equivalent of the jaw being removed from the body. We'll see in a second that's not the same. But that's exactly what the Gemara seems at this point to see that it's the same. So Maskala Rav Papa, and the reason that's important is because Rav Papa asked a question on Shmuel. How can you say that if the esophagus becomes detached from the jaw, it's going to be okay, it's going to be kasher, about ikar simanim? There's an uprooting of the pipes, which is a treifa, which is going to be a problem. Says the Gemara, Ulu Papa kasher masnisa nita lechia tachton kasher. Don't ask a kasha on, if you have such a problem, says the Gemara to Rav Papa, if you have such a problem, what are you asking, like, leave Shmuel alone, poor Shmuel, he's just going like the Mishnah. You want to ask a kasha, don't ask a kasha on Shmuel. When you ask a kasha on Shmuel, say, what do you want from me? That's what the Mishnah says. So the Gemara is going to say, no, the Mishnah is really different than Shmuel. Bishlama masnisa Rav Papa lo kasha hadi akar iakure. Because what's it talking about? Shmuel was talking about, as he says, and again, you can't read it into Shmuel, because Shmuel clearly says, Tarubar tzaveshet shenita kulo melechi kasher. It's very clear. The esophagus becomes detached from the jaw. That means that the pipes were totally uprooted from any part of the jaw, from the flesh. There's nothing to talk about. That's why Rav Papa says, how can you say that that's kasher? The Mishnah seems to say the same thing. No, it doesn't, says the Gemara. Ha-di-igu migume me'ilave simanim. No, there where it talks about, as the Mishnah says, nita lechia tachton, the jaw was removed from the pipes, but there's still some flesh there. So again, the Mishnah, when it says it's kasher, is really different than Shmuel, which is why Rav Papa could ask a kasha. Shmuel seems to be saying that it's kosher even if the entire esophagus was detached from the jaw and the flesh. The Mishnah, which says kosher, a papa would say, that's different. The Mishnah, which says kosher, is telling you that the jaw was removed, but the flesh was still there, and therefore the simanim were still attached to the flesh. Says the Gemara, Shmuel kasher, it's difficult according to Shmuel. Says the Gemara, you're right, you have to change what Shmuel says. Shmuel didn't say torbat zavesha shenita al kulo milechi kasher, that if the entire esophagus became detached from the lower jaw, it's still going to be kosher. Rubo became detached. But in Achanami, if the entire esophagus became detached, it would not be kosher, and it would be a treifa. If rove becomes detached, but some of it is still attached, then it's going to be okay, because it'll be similar, not exactly, but it'll be similar to the Mishnah, where it's still attached to the flesh. In the Mishnah, it seems like the entire thing is attached to the flesh. Here, it's not the entire thing, but it's still attached to the flesh. Says the Gemara, Lo tema kulo ela ema rubo. V'amar Rav Bar Chana Amar Shmuel, it's a beautiful pshat, except simanim shenidaldalu beruban treifa. We know that would be a beautiful pshat, but we know that Shmuel holds elsewhere that if rove of the pipes are detached, it is a treifa. So you can't tell me that he holds a rove of the pipes being detached as kosher. Amar Rav Shisha Brei de Ravidi ha de ikbal ikpule hasam de afarok aparuke. Literally, it means it was peeled versus it was separated discontinuously. As Rashi explains, and as Rishonim explained, basically what it's telling you is as follows. Shmuel holds that if most of it is detached, it's still kosher. He seemed to have said that if most of them become detached, it's going to be a treifa. It depends how it was detached. If it was peeled away, so it's still connected, it sounds like one of the layers, again, I'm oversimplifying it, but it sounds like one of the layers was peeled away. It's still very strongly attached, even though I would say, let's say the bottom half is attached, but it's attached in a very strong way. You can be attached to something 50%, and it can be 50% attached but very strong, or it can be 50% attached and very weak. If the whole endings are like cut, like it says, ipruke, that it was separated discontinuously, that means there's a little bit pull here, a little bit pull there, it could be attached, 50% of the things can be attached, but it's still very, very lightly attached. So when it's rubo attached, it's even if it's a miyud attached, it's fine depending on how attached it is. If it's strongly attached, bottom line, it's going to be okay according to Shmuel. If it's not strongly attached, then it's going to be a problem according to Shmuel as well. So it comes out again. If it's mostly attached, everybody says kosher and the shechita is valid. If it's mostly detached, but it's as a result of peeling, then what? It's kosher because we see that it's detached, but it's still strongly attached. If it's mostly detached by, again, the second case would have happened. How would it become mostly detached but not really connected well? If it was pulled, if it was like tugged. So if it's mostly detached and it's not even closely connected, it's very, very weakly connected, then it would be considered to be a treifa. Says the Gemara, Upsukas agargeres. The trachea is severed, it's treifa. Now obviously, again, this is when the trachea is severed, not during a kosher shechita. If you do a kosher shechita, the trachea being severed would not be a problem, or else you'll always have a treifa. It's talking about where you sever the trachea. Now it's interesting because it would come out that whatever you're going to tell me now makes a severed trachea for a treifa would also be what makes a severed trachea seemingly to make it kosher during a shechita. That would seem to be the same thing, the flip side of the coin. Upsukas agargeres, where the trachea is severed, Tana, kama upsukas agargeres, how much is that? Beruba. It has to be a majority. It means that when you cut the animal, again, we're cutting it from the bottom, right? If you imagine the head over here, you're cutting it from the bottom. You have to cut going up, not in terms of the circumference. You have to cut through. Talking about if this is the trachea, if this is the trachea, we're talking about how far through the trachea from the bottom up do you have to cut? At what point have you said, I've cut enough? Obviously, if you cut the entire trachea, you're good to go. The question is, how much you have to cut? Do you have to cut into the skin? Do you have to cut? You obviously have to cut into the hole. The question is, how far into the hole does the knife have to go? Does it have to go to here? Because there's still flesh in here. Does it have to go through the top? How far does it have to go? So it says the rov. V'kama ruba. Rav Amar. Rav says, rov ovya. V'amri la rov halal. If you just look at that picture, if you don't have it, there's a picture here. That one picture on the top left. None of the other fancy pictures. But if you look at the top left and the bottom left, you could look at it. It's very interesting. One of them says a majority of the thickness and a majority of the hollow. Now this is what a trachea looks like, again, from this area. But what's interesting is as you see in the picture, the top, as you see in the picture, the top of the trachea is thicker than the bottom. Why does that matter? This is like double the thickness, let's say. Because, I'm sorry, the bottom. We're talking about the bottom. The bottom is thicker than the top. As you see here, right? If you just use my finger, you can't see, but this is thicker. Let's assume that this is thicker. So let's say the whole thing is, just for argument's sake, 100. This would be 25. This would be 60. And this would be 15. Right? I'm just trying to make it easy. Let's say the whole thing is 100. Just an argument's sake, random number. 25, 45, or 40.
60.
And then what?
60, then 15.
25, 60, and then 15. 25, 60, 15.
Are you doing the area?
Drop
or
that.
the circumference?
I'm just talking about the height, the thickness. Thickness. I'm not talking about the diameter. But that's not the question. The question here is not. It's not exactly. So you have 25. I'm just talking about the diameter. I'm just talking about the thickness. I dropped out of high school. I don't know. All I know is 25, 60, 15. I'm talking about from the top to bottom. You're cutting through like this. How far does the knife have to go up? So if this is 20, let's say this 25 millimeters, 60 millimeters, and then 15 millimeters. So the interesting thing is that if you don't include this, then everybody's going to agree that half of this is whatever it is, right? 25, 15, and this is 60, so 30 would be the half. So when you're talking about rov chalala, the majority of the chalala means you have to cut up to 31 of the chalala, which would be 30 plus 25. You'd have to cut to the 56 point in terms of if you're going to measure the entire thing. But if you say rov of ovia is the thickness, the rov of the thickness is going to be 25 plus another 25. Right. So it's going to be lower. So it's going to be a chumrah over here and a kula by shchita. Rov ovia is more machmir because that means that what? As soon as you cut up to 51, you made it a treifa. Right. According to the other opinion, you need to cut half of the halal, which will mean you have to cut the 25, which we don't care about, then another 30. So until you get up to 56, you didn't make it into a treifa. Again, the flip side by shchita would be that in the first one, if you cut up to 51, you did a kosher shchita. In the second one, if you cut up to 55. But I'm just talking about, again, because this is thicker, if you count this, then you have to go lower in order to make it kosher slash a treifa if you're not shechting. If we don't care about the top and the bottom, we just care about the hollow part, which is what we're calling halala, then you just have to go to point 30 over here, which is halfway. Well, if you add up the 25 and the 30, you're going to point 56. That's what he means over there. That's why if you look at the knife over there, if you look at point of rov avia, majority of the thickness, it's higher up. Now, what's confusing about this picture is that the picture is really the opposite way. You have to flip the Gemara upside down. Sometimes when you learn in CHULLIN, you feel like you're learning the Gemara upside down anyway. But it's really from the bottom. So you're cutting from the bottom. If you go rov ovia, you're going to the midway point. If you're going to rov ovia, you're going to the midway point from top to bottom. If you're going to rov halal, it's going to be higher up. So again, if you're talking about a treifa, rov ovia is going to be a lower point, so it's going to be more machmir. Rov halala is going to be a higher point because we're ignoring the top and the bottom. We're just taking the 60 and we're going to the 30 point. If you're going at rov ovia, you're counting the 25 plus 25, so at 50 you're going to be at halfway because the whole thing's 100, but according to the other one you're not going to get there till you're at 56, 57, whatever.
Can a human eye discern it by itself?
I'm assuming by looking at it. I'm assuming, well, no, you're looking at it after you shecht it.
Yeah, but you see the difference in rov halal and
4
rov
millimeters,
ovia,
5 millimeters.
Again,
see that.
I'm obviously oversimplifying it, but if you look at a trachea, I guess you could tell. You can tell. You have to remember, doctor, you're also
Check it afterwards.
Yeah.
you can check it afterwards, and you're able to measure because this is going to be cut.
Yeah.
Right. This is going to be here, and this is going to be here. If you don't cut all the way through, then you'll be able to see how much of the trachea was actually cut. Listen, it's not for the average guy.
When you went to the slaughterhouse,
They just cut all the way
cut
through.
straight
Yeah. This is not. They cut all the way through.
Yeah, chop.
They just chop. No, they can't chop. You chop
Well,
zasser, but they literally
forth, so
go like
that's
this, and they cut all the way through. You see the hole. You see the animal's head go like that, and then you see the entire thing is cut.
That's very cool.
Yeah, it's not so cool. Says the Gemara. Says Gemara. Let's go. Hahip sukas agargeris ta'asay lekame de Rav. So there was a trachea that was cut that came before Rav, and they want to know what the story is. Yosef v'kabadak labirov ovia. So he went and he examined it with the rov ovia, which we said is going to be more machmir, because it's going to be a lower point, that if you even get severed up to the lower point, it's going to be a problem. Now it's important to note here that he didn't go ahead. They're doing construction. He said it's important to note here that he didn't actually rule on it. He didn't actually rule on the thing. They're doing construction. He didn't actually rule on the animal. He didn't say this is puzzle. Because if he would have ruled on it, even if somebody would have argued, then the problem, right, it's like you can't ask. If I say go ask somebody else, it's very different than saying it's treif. So they asked him, what's the story with this? Because again, had he ruled based on what he held, rov ovia, he would have held that it was high enough, it was at the 51 point, he would have held that this is a treifa. Amrulei Rav Kahana Rav Asi LeRav, before he ruled, they said to Rav, Limadatana Rabbeinu Barav Chalal, I thought you taught us that that's not enough. It has to actually be cut more all the way through the rov of the chalal in order to be a problem. So before he ruled, he shadrei lekame de Rabba bar Barchana. So he sent the trachea to Rabbi Bar Chana, Badka berov chalala ve'achshara. He held that what? He held that a rov chalala, so he was more makil. He said it's okay. And not only that, he wanted to step up, he wanted to show where he wanted to back up his words. V'zavin mina b'tzleisar istirei pshite bisra. Not only did Rabbi Bar Chana go ahead and say it's okay, he said if you don't trust me here, I'm going to eat it too. It's one thing to say it's okay, it's another thing to say I'm going to eat it too. It says in Gemara, v'hechi avid hachi. How could he have done this? Rabbi Bar Chana. You basically had Rav, who said that it's not okay without saying it's not okay. He basically said, okay, then don't ask me. Because again, how did they know? Before he ruled, they saw him examining. You could see whether he's examining after he cut it. He clearly took it. You could see whether he's measuring with his measuring thing. He's measuring the thickness, or he's just measuring the halala. Clearly, he wasn't just measuring the halala. He was measuring the thickness. What are you measuring the thickness for? You should only be measuring the halala. Says the Gemara. So how could Rabbi Bar Chana go against what Rav felt was forbidden? How could he go ahead against what Rav says? It's interesting. He brings down the Ran over here that there's a few different reasons why you can't go against what another Rav says. First of all, it has to be respect for him. It's not kavod. Second of all, if you start having conflicting rulings, and this is a big problem, then people start saying the Torah is a bunch of baloney. How could you say this and you say this? They don't understand Shimon Panim the Torah. And also, if you go ahead according to, in certain circumstances, the actual ruling of the Rav is what the metzias of the item becomes. And if he rules it's forbidden, it's now forbidden, even if you now go ahead and say it's okay, depending on the circumstance. So how could he have done that? Shani hacha de Rav lo asa mesa. Like I said, Rav never paskin on this. He started measuring it. He started looking at it. His students questioned him during the process. They said, you know what? You don't want to ask me, so go ask somebody else. But he never actually gave a psak. Had he given a psak, Rabbi Bar Chana would never have gone ahead. Eitz tova, yeah. So he never even said anything. He just said, go ask somebody else. You know the answer. People do this all the time now. They know what I'm going to say. They know what he's going to say. So, you know, you got to shop around. I need a heter, I go to this one. I need a heter, I go to this one. And now we have another question. If you're going to say that he didn't rule on it, and you just sent it to him, the problem is that we have another rule. The other rule is that if you want to be righteous, you don't eat anything that even has a question. Anything that even smells of being a problem. So Eina Chanami, he ruled that it was okay, but at the end of the day, Rav would have ruled, or Rav was thinking that it's maybe not okay. So how could he go ahead, since there was a whole question, how could somebody like Rabbi Bar Chana eat something that's even a question? It says in Yecheskel was commanded to eat a certain type of food that had been cooked, doesn't sound so appetizing, over a fire that was fueled by human waste. And he says, it's disgusting. I'm always so careful of what I eat. How can I eat something that was cooked over a fire of human waste? Obviously, in terms of kashrut, it's not a problem. But how can I go ahead? He was very refined. What did he say to Hashem? I've never become tameh. I've never eaten a velo treif. I never ate pigol. The Gemara says this can't be literal. It was like me getting up in shul and want to say, I've never killed anybody. I've never committed a rayos. I've never stolen $1 million. Like, shkayach, okay? You're doing what you're supposed to do. It clearly says what? He was saying that I'm very righteous and I didn't do any of these things, and these things are clearly even things that would be mutter. Like what? What does that mean? Not that it's mutter. I never even had impure thoughts, or I never looked at a woman during the day so that I'd have impure thoughts so that I would become tameh during the night. Doesn't literally mean I didn't eat nevelo treifa. I never ate a mizukenes. We know, of course, you could eat an animal that gets old. But I never ate an animal even when it got old, and they said, quick, slaughter it before it dies. I didn't want to take any chances, and maybe it's a treifa, maybe it's not 100% healthy. I never did that. I never ate that. I never ate pigol. What does that mean? Not necessarily that I didn't eat pigol. I never ate something that had a question. What does that have to do with pigol? Because it's a thought. Pigol's all about thought. I never ate anything that a thought, it was a question in the thought of the person asking the question. I never ate anything that was even a question. Mishum Rabbi Nassan, where they said a different thing. What does it mean I didn't eat pigol? And the Rishonim explain why this is called pigol. But I never even ate from an animal that the gifts that were given to a Kohen had not been removed, which he was allowed to eat, because he was a Kohen, Yecheskel. But at the end of the day, what do we see? That a righteous person doesn't go ahead and eat anything that even has a question mark attached to it, as we clearly see from Yecheskel. So how can Rabbi Bar Chana eat this which had a question mark attached to it? What's the obvious answer? Hanimili milsa detalya besvara. Rabbi Bar Chana agam rei samach. It's very different here. When you talk about something that has a question attached to it, there was no question attached to this in Rabbi Bar Chana's mind. There was just a machlokes as what the halacha is. He holds its rov avya, he holds its rov halala, but according to the mesorah that he has, this piece of meat is 100% kosher. What would be an example of not eating something that's a questionable thing? That means you know the halacha. The question is how to apply the halacha. So for instance, just as an example, when you check out a behemoth after it's shechted and you look at the lungs, and it's maybe a problem, maybe not a problem. It's maybe a blemish, maybe not a blemish. That's where you know the halacha. A blemish is a problem. A thing on the lungs, an adhesion on the lungs is a problem, but it's not clear whether this is actually a blemish or this is an adhesion or a million other examples. That's an example of something that maybe it's forbidden, maybe it's not. So a tzaddik, somebody that's righteous, doesn't go ahead and take a chance. But if I, what?
Chassid, not tzaddik. Chassid.
Well, he's talking about, okay, he doesn't say chassid here. He says somebody that's righteous, a chassid. But over here, this is not a matter of being a chassid. His mesorah was that you measure based on rov of the chalala. And therefore, if you measure based on rov of the chalala, and you go ahead and it says that what? Rov of the chalala is fine, so it's 100% fine. Either there's opinion that holds that it's rov of the ovya, that it's a rov of the entire thing. I don't hold like that. So it's not that he's going ahead and doing something that he shouldn't have done. Had he had a question on a lung, on a blemish, he wouldn't have eaten it, ain't a chanami. But the fact is that he didn't have any question. According to his svar, according to his mesorah, what he did was 1,000% kosher. Says the Gemara, we have one other problem. V'tepukle mishum chashada. But now we have an appearance of impropriety. Why? Because what's going to happen over here? Oh, you have a question? Okay, ask me. Oh, is my cow kosher? Yeah, it looks good. It's not a treifa. By the way, can I buy half the cow from you? So now he's going to eat it. So now he bought half the cow after paskening on it. Everybody likes to talk, even back then. And what happened? They're going to say, oh, look, the rabbi just said it's kosher because he was hungry. And he wanted to buy this cow.
Or he got bought off.
Or he got bought off. Now he gets a piece of the cow.
Yeah.
Says the Gemara, Detanya, Danis Hadin, if you're the Dan, Zika, V'chiev Timei V'tir, Asa V'hitter, V'chena Edim Shahidu, whether you're the judge or the Edim, Kulan Rishayin Likach, you can go ahead and you can buy. It's not so pashut, it sounds like, again, I'm not getting into it, but it sounds like it's not so pashut that you can go ahead and you can get a piece afterwards. Here you're buying it. If they start giving you a piece, it's a little bit more shady. But now you're literally buying it. Avalamu chachamim, harchek min hakir min hadomelo. Stay away from anything shady. Therefore, how could he go ahead and buy it? Yes, he didn't go against his Rav because the Rav never paskined. Yes, he didn't do anything wrong because according to him it was 100% mutter. But at the end of the day, people are going to be watching and say, he has a nice dinner. The only reason he said that it was kosher was really treifa. He paskined kosher because he was hungry. How's he going to get around that? Hani mili, very fascinating. This whole Gemara is fascinating. Midei de mizavin mishuma. No. When we talk about being careful after judging a case or being an aid, it's when you buy something based on appraisal. Again, getting something as a gift afterwards might be a problem, especially from the outside world and how they look at it. But when you buy something based on a mizavin mishuma, an appraisal, then it becomes shady. Because if he looks at it and he says, you know what, give me $100 for this. I'm not going to weigh it, just between me and you, $100. Then it looks like, wow, it was really shady. But what happens here? He sold him the meat. Everybody who's watching, all the guys that are hawkers who want to make sure that, we want to catch the rabbi doing something wrong, what are they going to do? They're going to watch that he took the meat, he put it on the scale, and he paid the exact full price for the meat. So what's the difference if he bought it from him? The rabbi had nothing to gain by telling him that this was kosher. Because at the end of the day, he bought it again. The fact that he might have slipped him 100, well, we're not going to be concerned about that, but because he could have done that in private anyway. But the point is that when he bought the meat, and I'm watching in Sobeys, so the fact that I bought this cow versus that cow, I would have paid $100 for the piece of meat I bought from this cow. I would have paid $100 for the piece of meat from a different cow. I had no incentive to go ahead and say that your meat was better, or to say that your meat was kosher. So that's a Gemara, Kihad Derava.
The only cow.
What? Unless that's the only cow. Kihad Rava Shara Treifta Vizavin Mine Bisra. Same thing with Rava. Rava, somebody brought him a possible treif and he said it's kosher. And then his wife, Amrle Bas Rav Chisda, Rava was married to Rav Chisda's daughter. This is how the things, like who's married to who? You know it like from these Gemaras, where it says that his wife, Rav Chisda's daughter, doesn't actually say it's his wife, but he wouldn't be talking to anybody else. Rav Chisda's daughter, his wife, said to him, Abba Shari Bukhra Velo Zavin Mine Bisra. When my father would permit a Bechor, because again, why did he have to permit a Bechor? Because we know that at the times that there was no Beis HaMikdash, and you got a Bechor, so if it was at the times of the Beis HaMikdash and it was unblemished, and then the Kohen would bring the Bechor to the Beis HaMikdash. But when there was no Beis HaMikdash, so you can't do anything with an unblemished Bechor. What would they do? They would let it roam around, and when it got a blemish, then he could go ahead and he could eat it. So, says the Gemara, they'd have to bring it to a rabbi who was in charge of saying, this is a blemish, and you can go ahead, this is not a temporary blemish, this is a full blemish, and you can go ahead and you can eat it. So they would bring it to who? They would bring it to my father, this is what Rav Chisda's daughter said, and he would never buy the meat. When somebody, right, if he would say, this is a blemish, you could go shecht it, he wouldn't say, oh, by the way, can I have a piece? Because that would look bad. So how can you go ahead, and now that you're permitting a treifa, how can you go ahead and buy some of the meat? Amar la, hani mili bukhra. Dashuma mizdavin. Hacha matgila mochach. Ma'ika mishum umsamal yisa. Kol yoma umsamal yisa zavnuli. Very interesting. He says the halacha by a bechor, because it's a bechor, the halacha is that after it becomes a quote unquote blemished, you can shecht it, but you can even sell it, but you can't sell it by the pound. Because if you sell it by the pound, it's very degrading to a bechor that was holy. You can go ahead and you can appraise it, you can eye it. So over there, that's why he was very makbid. Because over there, when he said that the bechor is blemished, so now if he wanted to buy a piece of the meat, they would have to do an appraisal. They would say, well, he's getting a good deal, he's giving him a discount, this and that. If they would weigh it, we just said it's not a problem, because then everybody sees that you're not paying anything better. So by the bechor case, that's why Rav Chisda was very makbid. Over here, where I get a piece and I'm paying the full price of the meat, so lamaisa, it's not a problem. So his wife said back to him, yeah, but they're always giving you the prime cut. They're always giving you the best piece of meat. He says, they always give me the best piece of meat anyway. I'm the rabbi. What do you want? So lamaisa, he gets the best piece of meat anyway. People know he's getting the best piece of meat anyway, but he's paying for it, and he's paying full price, but he's not getting any mitzias. But it's interesting, it comes out, there'll be a lot of interesting discussions. That if you ask me a question, and then I say, yeah, the land is yours, and I paskin, and then I buy half of the land from you the next day, it's a big problem. It sounds like it could be a problem. Amar Rav Chisda. We'll end with this, a little of a gadata. Ezu Talmud Chacham. Who's a Talmud Chacham? Zaharoa Trei Falatzman. Again, it's interesting, because today we talk about Talmud Chacham, you know a lot of Torah. That's not what it means here. Ezu Talmud Chacham, haroa treifa la'atzmo. You see a treifa, I have my own animal, I see a treifa. Now when I'm the rabbi, it's one thing to say, well, your chullin is a problem. Your animal, yeah, that's a treifa. But when I have the same exact animal for myself, it's a lot harder to say that's a treifa. But when I say it's a treifa, even for myself, that's a Talmud Chacham. That's somebody that's real, because he's not going to go ahead and start to finagle. And this is always a challenge. You start to finagle things when it comes to yourself. Similarly, who's a person who hates gifts? He doesn't want the gift of a free thing, where lamais it's really a problem, but he pretends that it's not a problem. Anybody who studies and he sees a treifa, and he's mishamish Again, same idea, where a rabbi goes ahead and he's careful even with his own stuff, and he's makbid even on his own stuff, so he'll be ashrecha in this world, he'll have what he needs in this world, and Hashem will take care of him with the schar in olam haba. Rabbi Lazar kiyavu mishadri le mi beinisia midei lo shaka. Going to this pasuk of Sonei matanos yichya, you shouldn't like getting gifts. So Rabbi Lazar would never accept anything from the house of the Nasi. The Nasi was the equivalent of the Reish Galusa. Reish Galusa in Bavel, the Nasi was in Eretz Yisrael. So Rabbi Lazar would never accept something when they would send him a gift from the house of the Nasi. When they would invite him, he would never go. Amar lo kabay mar de'echei. He said to the Nasi, do you not wish that I want to live? It says somebody that hates matanos is going to live. I want to live. I don't want to come to your house. I don't want your gifts. I don't want to eat at your house. That's what Rabbi Lazar said. Rabbi Zera, ki mishadri le lo shake. When Rabbi Zera, when they would send him gifts, they wouldn't take it, because again, Sonei matanos yichya. He doesn't want to get gifts. He doesn't want to be supported by others. He doesn't want to rely on other people. He wants to have emunah on Shem, etc., etc. But when they would invite him to the base Nasi, he would go. Why? Amar, he said, Isyakurehu to misyakrubi. I'm not accepting a gift by going to the Nasi's house. It's his benefit that I'm coming to his house to eat. Lamaisa, he's the one getting the gift by me going. So when he's actually sending a gift, that I'm not going to take. But he's having the prestige of me, again, there's obviously more to the story, but he's having the prestige of me coming to his house for a meal. That's not getting a gift, that's actually doing them a favor, and therefore it would not be a problem of Sonei Matanuch Tichya. If you want to invite me to your house, then we'll talk about it.
Which one lived